Chapter 2. Religion is a development from within, and not a foreign element imported into our nature without. The divine element in human nature is not something of which we are horn destitute, and that is afterwards to be superadded to our being by instruction in the religious propagandism of the Church, but is the seed, and the only vital germ, from which our existence springs. This divine germ is enclosed as in a pericarp in every one of the human race, the savage and the saint. It is not the true function of preaching and of religious instruction to import the divine life as a foreign element into human nature, for it is already there, but to bring men to a conscious realization of this truth. The religious element in man is not something communicated to him from without, but is an original constituent of his nature, and one which may be drawn forth and modified in its action by instruction and influences received from others. It is not something entirely adventitious, but is inherent in the essence of the soul. The universal prevalence of religion in the world among all races and in all ages of human history would militate against the theory that it is something extraneous, and goes to prove that it is natural to man, and a necessary outcome of his mental constitution as much as language, or poetry, or music, or civil government. This does not make it any less divine, for God is in all natural powers, susceptibilities, and laws. Certain it is, I have never found a man in whom the religious sentiments were utterly suppressed or annihilated. In many men the religious nature is latent and overlaid by a deep covering of externality, but there is still the vital germ in the depths of the soul that awaits the vivifying touch of the divine spirit to cause it to sprout, and to be unfolded into the flower and fruit of a religious consciousness and life. It is only a question of the best means of developing this divine instinct of the soul. A seed may remain dormant for a long series of years without losing its vitality, and when exposed to the proper influence of moisture, heat, and genial sunshine, it starts into a manifested life spontaneously. As we could never be taught morality without a moral nature and a moral sense to distinguish between right and wrong, and as we could not be taught music or mathematics without an inborn genius for those sciences, so the same is true of religion. All education implies something in the hidden depths of the soul to be adduced or developed into conscious activity. On this principle is based the system of Froebel. All moral and religious education consists in awakening and properly directing what is already potentially within us. On this subject, Sir Morel justly observes, we could never be taught religion by any external appliances unless there was some inward susceptibility which may indeed be aroused or regulated by discipline, but which has a prior existence as a primary element of our spiritual nature. This view, when fully recognized, must essentially modify our idea of the nature of regeneration. It is no longer a new creation, but a development. Religion will never be propagated with any great success unless this self-evident and fundamental truth is acknowledged, and the means of propagandism be adapted to it. The true religious life is an evolution, the unfolding of a latent and dormant power within us. We must not confound religion with theology. Theology is what we think about religion, and this is an ever-changing thing, but true religion remains the same. The stars do not constitute astronomy, nor the rocky strata of the earth geology, but astronomy is what we know about the stars and geology what we know or think about the rocks. Religion is the union of man with God, or as Schelling defines it, the union of the finite with the infinite. But this may be predicated of all men. If it be true, as Paul L. affirms, that in him we live and move and have our being, or in other words, that God is the inmost life of all that is, and the ground of our own existence, then no human mind is or can be entirely sundered from the divine mind, or can have any life that is not a manifestation of the one life. We may lose the consciousness of this, but there is a region of the soul where God perpetually dwells, and in which our life is linked to the deity. The incarnation is not a solitary miracle in the course of human history, and something outside of that fixed order of things which we call the laws of nature, and confined to one individual of the race, but a universal fact, without which the existence of the soul here, and its immortality hereafter, would be an impossibility. The human soul is distinct from the deity, but not separate. It retains its self-consciousness and individuality and never loses its personal identity in an all-pervading impersonal pneuma, or becomes a part of the abstract reason. Though the soul retains a connection with the totality of spirit, it is never merged in it, like a drop falling into the ocean. The more fully and consciously it is united to the all, the more it becomes itself. The true theory is this, that owing to the incarnation of God in every individual soul, and in the whole of humanity, Every man has within himself a region of the soul where he may have direct and immediate communication and converse with the divine mind. Man is an individual endowed with free will, but in being an individual possessing self-consciousness, he does not become an exile from God. He is not banished from the divine presence, but is still enclosed within the infinite circle of the divine life. Through this medium, he may learn all that is essential to his highest interests in this world and the next, and may gain the highest truths of wisdom in relation to health of mind and body. All our knowledge of spiritual things comes from this source, and is, in a proper sense, a revelation from God, and a ray of that uncreated and divine word that lighteth every man that cometh into the world. All men, in favored moments, have experiences of this spiritual illumination, this awakening and quickening of the intuitive perception, and might have much more if they understood the laws and conditions of its transmission and receptivity. The reality of a present inspiration from God, both of life and light, in all human souls, can be established as a fact in mental philosophy, resting on a foundation of evidence facts more substantial than that of most metaphysical theories. One of the first results of this nearness of man to God is the revelation of God to man. The existence of God is a truth to be seen, not to be proved. There is no demonstration of the being of God that does not involve some logical absurdity, or, at least, a petitio principii, or begging of the question. The central sun of our system shines with his own light, and makes himself known to all the planets that revolve around this central orb. Their light is borrowed or imparted light, and not self-originated. God may be so very near to us that we cannot see him, but only feel him, and this is the highest possible evidence. Thus, Paul says that we should seek the Lord, if haply we might feel after him and find him, though he is not far from every one of us. Conscious contact of the soul with God, and all-satisfying communion and fellowship with him, is the highest demonstration of his existence, for to feel anything to be true is to attain to a state of certainty and freedom from all doubt. It has been truly said by Emmanuel Hermann Fichte that God is not merely an object of faith, as is usually said. He operates faith in us, and gives in this very fact the most lively proof of his existence and care. He makes known himself to the religious consciousness with more certainty and force of evidence than the external world is made known to our senses. He reveals himself to the intuitive reason, or, as Kant calls it, the pure reason, which is the highest evidence the mind is capable of receiving, in the attainment of certainty as to the divine existence, so that the being of God is no longer a doubtful hypothesis, but he becomes to us the only reality. Our pathway is open to the fountain of all health and blessedness. As in the age of Augustus, all the magnificent highways of the empire centered in Rome, and conducted the traveler from the provinces by an unerring route to the place whence emanated all subordinate, all authority and power. So to the man who has attained to the consciousness of God, and of our vital relations to him, all remedies will conduct us to the central life, and will bring the sick and bewildered wanderer to him, from whom proceeds every sanative potency for soul or body. For it is the divine alone that heals. There is one truth, of which we must never lose sight, that there is but one life in the universe. As Fichte has said, being is simple and uncompounded. There is not a multiplicity of beings, but only one being. Being and life are the same. This one being, one life, is what Jesus calls the Father, because from him everything springs. By existence we mean manifested being. This is endlessly varied and multiplied. But all existences, from the atom to the world, from the insect to the angel, have their ground in the one being and life of which they are but manifestations to consciousness, that is, to sense and thought. All the millions of the race are but the rising into individuality of the ocean of being, but never lose their connection with it. They are a personal cropping out of the primal life, as mountains are an upheaval of the primitive rock, but are not sundered from it. The Father is in us, and we are in the Father. In the innermost root of our existence we are inseparably and perpetually connected with him. Otherwise we could not exist at all, and because of it we shall live forever. An insight into the absolute unity of the human existence with the divine is certainly the profoundest knowledge that man can attain. Before Jesus this knowledge had nowhere existed, and since his time, we may say down even to the present day, it has been again as good as rooted out, at least in profane literature. The grand error of the religious world has ever been in separating God too far from man. It has believed in a divine being who is somewhere, but not here, and indeed who is anywhere and everywhere except in man. It is a fundamental doctrine of Swedenborg's spiritual philosophy, and one that comes continually to view in all his voluminous writings, that there is only one life in the universe, and angels, spirits, and men are but recipients of it. Our life is perpetually imparted from him. His being flows forth into our existence, which is but a manifestation of it, and is continuous with it. Our individual life is identical with his, and is included as an item or an atom in the sum total of the divine existence. The thread of our life, without a break, is ever unwound from his. Swedenborg also affirms that man is so made that he can apply to himself life from the Lord. In other words, as an individual existence, he can appropriate more of the divine life and make it his own, as you can enlarge the stream that flows from the lake in the mountains and increase its volume by deepening the channel. In certain elevated states, we become more highly charged with a divine vitality and become, in a more exalted degree, incarnations of the deity. This fits us for the higher uses of life, as the spiritual instruction of others, and the cure of their mental and bodily maladies. This is what is called, in the expressive language of the New Testament, being endued with power from on high. Descartes, the father of modern speculative philosophy, affirmed that God has accorded to created things no principle of subsistence in themselves, and that the existence of everything, from moment to moment, is due to the renewal each moment of the creative act of the deity. Since his day, the tendency of philosophy has been towards a fuller recognition of a divine life and force in nature. To a truly religious and spiritual man, the world is not a mere dead mass of material forces, but is everywhere seen to throb and pulsate with the life of God. It is everywhere interpenetrated with a living intelligence and thought, of which it is the existence or outward form and phenomenon. By Fichte, one of the most profoundly religious men of any age or country, nature is elevated into a living and sacred manifestation of the one eternal, divine life. According to him, religion consists in regarding and recognizing all earthly life as the necessary development of the one, original, perfectly good and perfectly blessed divine life, especially as man, in a preeminent degree, a manifestation of God. According to the meaning of true religion, and in particular of Christianity, humanity is the one, visible, efficient, living, and independent existence of God, or, if the expression be not misunderstood, the one manifestation and effluence of that existence, a beam from the eternal light, which divides itself, not in reality, but only to mere earthly vision, into many individual rays. However strange it may seem, it is nevertheless true that this higher view of God and of our relation to him, which arises naturally out of the profoundest religious consciousness and feeling, has almost always been viewed by more superficial minds as equivalent to atheism. Spinoza was ignorantly misapprehended and has been maliciously defamed. The memory of the God-intoxicated man has been ignominiously buried beneath the stones that the ferocious zeal of shallow souls have cast upon it. Every candid, religious mind will unhesitatingly adopt the language of Professor Perrier when he says, "This I will avouch, that all the outcry which has been raised against Spinoza has its origin in nothing but ignorance, hypocrisy, and cant. If Spinoza errs, it is in attributing not certainly too much to the great Creator, for that is impossible, but too little to the creature of his hands." Schleiermacher speaks of Spinoza as that holy and yet outlast man, who was full of the sentiment of religion, because he was filled with the Holy Spirit. Says Cousin, instead of accusing Spinoza of atheism, he should be subjected to the opposite reproach. Professor Cesse says of him, he has been loudly accused of atheism and impiety. The truth is that never did a man believe in God with a faith more profound, with a soul more sincere, than Spinoza. Take God from him, and you take from him his system, his thought, his life. Spinoza denied, as many great and pious divines have done, the free agency of man. Hegel escapes this charge by making the very essence of spirit to consist in freedom, and that of matter in passivity. When Spinoza affirms that God is the only substance, he uses the word not in a physical but in a metaphysical sense. According to him, substance is that which does not depend upon anything else for its existence. It is that which exists absolutely and of itself, and in this sense it is only another name for pure being. It is equivalent to the Hebrew Jehovah, which is derived from a substantive verb and signifies permanent being. With that definition of it, he logically infers that God is the only substance. He is the underlying, or, more properly, the understanding, reality, and support of all things. They do not exist separately from God, but in and from him. Spinoza asserts that whatever is in God, and nothing can be, nor be conceived to be, without God. The world and all it contains are the existence or outstanding of the divine being. This gives to the universe its appropriate name, the RONV of the Greeks, the mundus of the Latin, the Welt of the German, and the world of the English, which is radically the same as world. Jesus affirms that God is spirit, not a spirit, which is contrary to the Greek, and spirit is essentially active and living. God is not merely an extraneous, isolated, individual being, though his personality, in any proper sense of the word, is not denied, but the internal, collective, and intrinsic energy and life of all things from the sparrow to the archangel. He is the ever-present, ever-acting, and indivisible life of the world. Under the idea of the primal life, he was apprehended by the Greeks as well as by the Hebrews. Zeus and Theos, and even the Latin deus, are all derived from a verb meaning to live. Kuss, a distinguished physiologist of Strasbourg, has defined life to be all that which cannot be explained by chemistry or physics. But all the laws of chemistry and of every physical science are only modes of action of the one life. Physiology and even psychology are in their inmost essence only individual manifestations of the divine existence in man. As one has said, who will not be suspected of any heretical taint, there is something grand in the idea of the unity of all being, and the connection of our life with the whole life of the universe.